Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Frontline Club. Thank you for coming tonight. In a moment, I will hand you over to Jeremy Bowen, the BBC's Middle East editor, who's chairing tonight's discussion with Ramita Navai. Before I do that, if I can just ask you to switch your phones to silent, and when it comes to questions, if you can wait for the microphone because we're broadcasting live this evening. So over to Jeremy.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Frontline Club, and we are incredibly fortunate here tonight to have Ramita to talk to us about this extraordinary book. And, you know, yes, my job here is somewhat to plug it, but I have to say, get in the queue at the end and buy one. And I hope they have more copies than that, because it's really well worth it. It's an absolutely fabulous read. And I was saying to Ramita earlier, it is like no other book I've read about Iran, because it's showing these slices of life of people who have really quite extraordinary lives, and lives that people who don't know Tehran and don't know Iran would perhaps find slightly surprising, because Ramita, among people who aren't that familiar with Iran, sometimes the stereotypes overwhelm the reality, I think.
Yeah, and that's partly why I wrote it.
It says on the back, the publisher said this is about survival. So would you say that these, there are, I mean, tell us about the characters. Give us a snapshot of the people who you spoke to and whose stories who you've told. And it says on the back, it's about survival. Morals don't come into it. To live in Tehran, you have to lie. Morals don't come into it. Lying in Tehran is about survival, so survivors' stories. And what are they surviving to start with?
For me, it was really interesting to see how Iranians have adapted to 30 years of the Islamic regime, and they have adapted, and they're really pragmatic, adaptable people. And one of the ways they've adapted is that lying is just every day, commonplace. You have to do it. You don't think twice about it. It's really become part of the culture there now. And the characters, I really wanted to show just all of Tehran. I think we hear a lot about the rich north, kind of the rich, decadent north. For me, one of the most interesting parts of Tehran is the south, the poor, to put it crudely, poor working class South Tehran. And I first started kind of hanging out there in 2004, 2005.
Let me butt in there and tell us what you were doing at that particular time. And what about your own family background and the fact that you found yourself working in Tehran at that particular time?
So I was born in Iran. So my mum grew up here, and she met my dad at a party in Earl's Court. Didn't you, Mum? She's over there. He fell in love with her the minute he saw her. You can see why. And so he was in the Navy. He got posted back to Iran, and she went back there. In a way, I kind of followed in her footsteps, because she had never lived there in her adult years. Went back. I was born there. We kind of traveled between the two countries. Revolution happened. Before the revolution happened, my mother and I, and my brother, it was Black Friday. So it was really the day that the revolution kind of began, that the uprising gained momentum. It was kind of an auspicious day for us to be flying back to Iran to start a new life there. Of course, we didn't last long. So we flew back to London about 8-9 months later. So that was kind of me in Iran done. So I grew up here. With the usual grappling with identity issues that exiles grapple with. And then went back to work as a journalist in 2003. And then was working for The Times when I got my press card revoked, which, if there are Iranian journalists here, it happens to all of us at some point or other. They told me why. There was a really nice guy in the ministry at the time who told me, usually they never tell you why. He told me why. I'd been following a human rights case they weren't happy about, and I'd also written about a film called Marmoulak, the lizard, which had been banned in Iran. And it wasn't banned initially, actually. There was a great scene that I wrote about, and they didn't like this, that I was in the cinema. I went to cinema to watch it. So the film is about this convict who escapes from prison by dressing up as a cleric. And there's a scene in it where he's standing on the side of the road trying to hail a cab, and taxi drivers do not stop for clerics in Tehran. And no taxi driver would stop for him. And the whole of the cinema erupted in applause. They were very excited about this scene. And that's when the film was banned. And that's when I got my press card revoked. So when I got my press card revoked, I decided I didn't want to sit on my bum all day doing nothing. And I just volunteered at a school in South Tehran for street kids. And the school that I was in was Nasser Khosrow Street. It's a wonderful, one of my favorite roads in South Tehran. And it was for children who don't have identity papers and no right to education. So children of prostitutes, gypsies, and Afghan children. So it was when I was there, spent 3 months working at this school, that I came across just this incredible other part of the city, this incredible other world. At the same time, I made friends with a prostitute who was visiting a methadone clinic in South Tehran, and she was a heroin addict and she was HIV positive, and she would take me around her kind of stomping grounds, which were the kind of the back alleys of Tehran, where all the madams and the pimps and the drug dealers hung out.
Quite a bit of the book is actually mentioned sex. And one of the things you've written here is sex is an act of rebellion in Tehran, a form of protest. Only in sex do many of the younger generation feel truly free. It's a weapon, their bodies are weapons of revolt, you're saying. It's a backlash against years of sexual repression. Because sometimes over here in the West, when people look in the papers or watch the TV, they hear these awful cases of people who are getting thrown in prison or even executed because of their sexual choices. So explain how the two things coexist?
Yeah, I mean, God, as with Iran, as all the Iranians here will know, the society there is so contradictory. So you're right. On one hand, you could get killed for your sexual preferences. If you're caught, usually you need 4 witnesses if you're a woman. But yeah, it's extraordinary what's happening with the youth and sex in Tehran. For me, I kind of liken it to what happened with the fall of Franco. It was this really oppressive atmosphere, and it kind of exploded. It obviously hasn't quite exploded yet, but in most sections of Iranian society, you are expected to be a virgin. However, young people are young people the world over, and there are ways around this, which I talk about in the book.
You do, and that's one of the reasons why you need to buy it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to be. It's really quite fascinating. So, how does this fit into the lives that people lead there? Because you talk about survival stories. Are these people then you've chosen who essentially are on the underbelly of life in Tehran?
Yes, some of them are on the margins of society. They are, because they had extraordinary stories. And wherever I am, to really understand a city and the way a country ticks and the way it works, I'm always drawn to the dark side. I sound like Darth Vader, but but yeah. So I'm always drawn to the underbelly of a city. With Tehran, of course, there's sex and drugs in every single city, but everything is just so much more extreme there because of the social strictures, because of the boundaries that you have. So that was what interested me a lot, was with people on the margins. But there are characters who are ordinary Iranians. I really wanted it to be representative. So the characters are from kind of the whole social strata of Iranian society.
Would you say it's a cross-section?
Yes, I would. I have a kind of very ordinary housewife. She loves the supreme leader. Her and her mother cry whenever he's on TV. She wears a chador, and she, vehemently believes that the hijab should be compulsory. It's extraordinary, when she took her chador off, she had multiple ear piercings, jeans and Converse trainers, but she's a very pious young lady. Not hypocritical at all. She really believes what she says. She really does adore the supreme leader and the imams and the prophet, and she's got her favorite prophet. She believes it with all her heart. She knows most of the Quran off by heart. And I had really frank discussions with her, actually, about sex. She was very open talking about sex, about how she battles with her lust, that she feels lust. She thinks masturbation is a sin. So what she does and the advice she gets to help her abstain.
And who gives her the advice?
She uses a lot of Find a Fatwa websites.
And how does that work then? If you need a bit of advice and you get online about your lustful feelings, I mean, how do you then, what kind of advice do they get?
Well, you either look through the FAQs, frequently asked questions. There's a whole section on masturbation, depending on what Find a Fatwa website you're on. Or you submit your own question and you get an answer back. Or you go to your favoured mullah. That was one thing that I found quite interesting, was that a lot of Iranians, including posh, well-to-do, older socialite ladies, all have their kind of go-to mullahs for Islamic divination. It's a bit, no, it's not like going to a tarot reader, maybe it is. But so you go to a mullah, and I've done this. So you ask a question, and the mullah will open the holy book, will read a verse. He'll say some prayers first. You'll say the salavat together, prayer. He'll open the holy book, and he will read a verse and interpret the verse according to your question.
And I noticed that you say in part of the book that there are sometimes some quite arcane scenarios come out in these websites. There was one about what would happen if there was an earthquake and the woman upstairs, the aunt, fell down onto the bed of the young man below, and there was a ruling even on that.
And penetrated him.
I was going to say, yeah, that's right.
Would then the child be, was it the sex or the child be haram
The child
or not
then
haram?
be,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, legitimate or illegitimate. I think that's a really famous one that Iranians all here will know. Yes, there are some wonderful fatwas. Yeah, somebody.
So there was actually a ruling on. There was a ruling on that.
Oh yes, by Ayatollah Gilani. It's a famous Ayatollah. I think that's every Iranian's favorite fatwa.
Now, tell me why it is then that so little of this is known in the West in terms of, you look at I hope in Britain we're a bit more knowledgeable, but the image of Iran in the United States is still, for many, many people, or in Israel, is still a very unreconstructed view of, a bunch of fanatics, death to America, women dressed in black, none of the subtleties that you bring out, or indeed any of the human frailties that are on display.
Yeah, God, Israelis, I don't know if the Iranians here have the same experience. Lots of my best friends are Israelis. But yeah, the Israelis it's up backing away as soon as you say that you're Iranian. So you're right, and Americans as well. I have this view, I think, that Iran is this quite monolithic society. And one thing that I really wanted to do with my book is to show that it's actually so complex. There are actually so many different layers. And it's really impossible to kind of presume somebody's politics from their class or how much money they've got or how religious they are. So I met plenty of very religious Iranians whose wives are head to toe in the black chador, whose daughters wear the chador, yet who think that there should be a separation between the state and religion, or who think that the hijab should not be compulsory. So it's an amazing mix, and I think that's partly, post-revolution Iran. The revolution kind of exploded the class system there and mixed everything up.
Yeah, I've been going to Iran off and on for about a bit more than 20 years, more off than on, sadly, because it's very difficult for someone like me working for the BBC to get a visa, sadly, because I think it's a fabulously interesting country, and I just wish that we had more of a chance to get more of the, not just the high politics, but the slices of life onto our screens. But it is very, very difficult for journalists with British or American passports, whatever, to, as you know, to get in there and to work. So it's quite a, I think for the Western media in some ways it's still quite an undiscovered country.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are pretty ordinary, well, some of the stories are extraordinary, but kind of the everyday interactions between people here are really pretty ordinary, and they're pretty representative of a lot of Iranians. And I really wanted the reader to hear Iranian voices. Some of these stories were really easy for me to write. So I've written about an Iranian gangster who sells crystal meth, and I spent some time hanging out with these gangsters, and lots of the conversations there verbatim how they told me, how they were speaking, which, it was very easy to write. I really wanted the reader to hear the voice of Samaya, the pious housewife, to hear the gangster, to hear the aging old Jahel mobster.
Well, and there are these amazing stories in it. And the opening, the first character, your man Dariush, it reads like a thriller.
Yeah, his story is like a thriller. So that's one of the oldest stories. I picked that up, I think, in 2005.
Without giving it all away, and without giving the punchline away as well, just give the audience a quick reminder a quick resume about what he did and his story.
So he was an ordinary exile, grew up in America, and fell in love with a girl who was a member of the Mujahideen. And she said, basically, it's, me and the Mujahideen, or you're dumped. He was desperately in love with her, joined the Mujahideen, and he got chosen for a mission, an assassination mission. Was trained in Camp Ashraf and flew back to Tehran. Actually, that's mostly his story. I used interviews with other ex-Mujahidinis who were sent to Iran for missions as well, and I melded them together.
Let's talk a little bit about melding, because there's been a little bit of criticism of your book suggesting that they read as fabulous stories of individuals, but some of them are composites, aren't they?
Yes.
Can you explain why that is? Isn't that a little bit dishonest?
Everything in the book has happened or is happening now. Everything in there is 100% factual. So I've spent 10 years working as a journalist. Facts are what I deal in. I could not have done it without writing composite characters. It would have been impossible. I had to keep all of those people safe. And they spoke to me on condition of anonymity. That's the only way I could have got their stories. I know nearly all their stories, from beginning to end. And they would say to me what bits they were uncomfortable with me covering. I'll give you an example. So, Samaya. That story is as she told me. And I spoke to many people in her neighborhood.
This was the young girl who got married to her cousin.
Yes. So the character of her husband, she didn't want me to talk to her husband. I'm not going to talk to her husband about how he likes to watch porn and the breakdown of their marriage. She didn't want me to. There were a few bits that she wanted to change to protect herself. So then what I would do is that I would pick somebody from either they would help me, I would interview another person from the same background, same social background, another person who had been in a similar relationship, and that's the person I would base it on. So it's a real person. So it was really important to me that everything in there was real.
And I think, as a reader, that these are compromises well worth making, because you get, I think, to what seems to me to be the truth of what's going on. It's certainly as a foreign correspondent, no family links. I don't speak the language. When I've been in Iran, it is so hard to find out what the hell is going on sometimes that you can despair if you're not careful, and you have to do what you can. So for me, I think getting those insights are well worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the only way I could have done it. And I interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of people. And the characters themselves, so not all of them are composite characters. So Amir, it's one of my favourite stories, story very close to my heart. I'll give you another example about him. So he's a young man, just a wonderful, kind, fabulous young man, the real Amir. He told me that story in my kitchen, and he hadn't talked about it for a while. And yeah, it was very emotional. It was very emotional talking.
Which story is it? Tell the audience about that story.
So his parents were executed in the 1980s. They were leftists, so they weren't really political activists, but quite a few thousands of Iranians, mostly Mujahideen members, were executed in 1988, this one year. And he got a phone call a few years ago from a man who wanted to meet him, and it turned out he met this man, and it turned out that the man is the judge who sentenced his parents to death. And he was begging forgiveness. He still is begging forgiveness from Amir. And he did not want me to talk to the real judge. So at the moment, it's very overwhelming for him. And he's trying to extricate himself from the situation. But he did not want me to talk to the real judge. But I could not have written that story without talking to a judge. I was incredibly lucky to track down a judge with the help of some friends here, to track down a judge who worked in the revolutionary courts at the time when these executions happened. And my interview with him as well is practically verbatim as it's written, so that character is based on him. So, I couldn't have written anything that wasn't real or a character that I had not met. But and all conversations, actually, all descriptions and conversations are either as that person told me, or as I witnessed it.
Now, I was in Iran in 2009 in the immediate aftermath of the elections, at a time when the regime was cracking down on the demonstrations. I wasn't there for the big height of them, but there when there were still people trying to keep them going. And funnily enough, at the BBC, we haven't had a reporting visa to go to Iran, I think, ever since then. Well, I correct myself, my colleague Lise Doucette went briefly with the EU envoy there, Lady Ashton, but apart from that, and wasn't allowed out on the streets. So why do you think that those 2009 events didn't turn into what we saw not very long afterwards in Arab countries? And I know you've done a lot of great reporting yourself. I mean, in Syria, Ramita got an Emmy for her reporting from Syria. Fantastic film. Really fabulous film. And when you've read the book, find the film. And why do you think then that 2009 didn't happen for those people who wanted the Islamic Republic system to change? And why, compare it to a few years later, when in Arab countries they seemed anyway in 2011 to be bringing some change to their societies?
So I'll tell a little story quickly. 2009, I was due to cover the elections. I had been working non-stop. I was really, really tired. Phoned this friend of mine who's brilliant, quite well-known analyst on all matters Iran. And he said to me, nothing's going to happen. Don't even bother going. So, I didn't cover the elections. I think they were... I just sat at home crying as it all happened, and I wasn't there. I think they were so brutally crushed. The protests were so brutally crushed so quickly. I don't think anybody really stood a chance. What I do think is interesting, and this is what I've got, I spent 5 months in Iran last year, so I've spent quite a lot of time there in the last 2 years. What I really have got in the time that I've been spending there, talking to, lots of different people from all different parts of the city, all different parts of the country actually, is that people now are really scared of an uprising. They don't want one anymore. They're scared of revolution. They've seen what's happened in Syria, seen what's happened with the Arab Spring. And I met a lot of Iranians kind of resigned to the fact that change is going to come very slowly, but just happy with that now. And some people are hopeful about Rouhani, some not. But yeah, that's one thing that Iranians seem pretty united on, that they don't want some massive, they're very fearful of a bloodbath.
To what extent have sanctions made an impact there?
God, made a huge impact, you know, across the board actually. So, friends of mine, you know, wealthier Iranians can't travel anymore because their money is now worthless outside of Iran. Businesses hit really badly, all the way down to, you know, your ordinary average Joe Iranian. Cost of cheese tripled. You know, inflation is soaring. Cost of cheese tripled in 1 year. Rents are astronomical. I mean, that's not just sanctions. That's partly the mess that Ahmadinejad left the country in as well. But no, sanctions have had a crippling effect on healthcare as well. It's been really hard.
Do people, you know, insofar as Iran gets into the news bulletins of the Western media, very often it's in two contexts. It's one to do with the nuclear issue and one to do with Syria. To what degree do people, everyday people, talk about those things in their everyday lives? I mean, I know that Iranians are very interested in politics.
They love politics. I have noticed a growing apathy. So I was there when there was a historic handshake between Rouhani and Obama. It was really interesting, actually, to see the kind of disconnect between the coverage and the excitement here and what was happening there. So, you know, I'd log on using my VPN to Facebook, and there were all these amazing posts about this historic time and the news. It was all over the news and Twitter. And I'd go to my local butcher, and they were like, "What phone call? Who?" I mean, you know,
the phone call they had when he was heading for the airport, right?
Yeah.
And Obama and they picked up the phone to each other and they had a nice chat.
Yeah, there was much eye rolling, and they were like, "Well, let's just see." You know, quite a lot of people have become quite apathetic and have lost hope. I noticed that, and of course, the day after the phone call, these posters went up all around the city, including one at the bottom of my road. Of posters. The one at the bottom of my road was this Iranian hand coming to shake this American hand. The American hand was a clawed hand of the devil. So, so you know, you could really visually see, you know, the hardliners, that this internal battle between them going on.
I was in New York at that particular time when, and it was for the General Assembly at the UN, and I mean, it was a love-in. Rouhani was engaged in, and Zarif were engaged in such a charm offensive. I went to quite a few of the events they did with emigre communities, with the, you know, the foreign policy establishment, and the smiles, you know, the teeth, the grins. It was the laughs.
What was the atmosphere like?
It was immensely positive. I mean, I think people were delighted that it was going on, and they loved it when he smiled. It was that deep, you know, the level of debate that was happening at that particular time. But do you think they'll make a deal on nuclear weapons? I mean, what do you think? From
My insider,
yeah,
who's normally always wrong,
that the guy who told you not to go to the 2009 elections.
says he thinks so. But yeah.
But do you think that the system there in the Islamic Republic is, quote unquote, safe? In other words, that even though at the time of 2009 there were clear fissures within the ruling elite, that they've maybe come together thinking, well, at least we have to keep the system going?
I don't know about that. I think that there's definitely discord there, and that you can see that. I mean, with what happened just today, yesterday, with these, you all heard about the kids that got arrested for making this video. Happy. You know, did you say Farrell or Pharrell? Sorry. Pharrell. So these 6 Iranian kids made this happy video that kids have done all across, people have done all across the world. Exactly. They were arrested, paraded on TV yesterday, and today they were released, $100,000 bail for each of them. But Rouhani had tweeted, and obviously this is not, a government statement, and he said that he's not responsible for his actual tweets, but this shows you the discord between his administration and parts of government and the hardliners. He tweeted something about, happiness is a right for I can't remember exactly what, but, chill out hardliners, basically. And he
didn't post his own video, doing happy or anything like that. No.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah.
That would be
Rouhani and
good.
Zarif together.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's time that we opened this up a little bit to the audience here. I'm sure you have a lot of questions you want to ask Ramita. As we've heard already, don't forget this is being streamed, so don't talk until the microphone reaches you, because your words will not be shared with our audience out there. So hands up, please. There's a hand up here.
Hi, Ramita. Carol Gould. Thank
I
you for
recognise
tweeting
your
me.
Twitter
Yeah,
picture.
yeah. Quick anecdote before I ask my question. I'm a broadcaster and journalist, and occasionally I am invited onto Iranian TV here. And one of the interesting things is after the show, the young lady in the control room in Tehran always says, don't go yet. Where did you get your scarf? And we end up having this lovely discussion about monsoon, or are the scarves better at Liberty? And I find it very poignant, very touching that we have these discussions, like 2 girls with no distance between us. My question is, I keep moaning, I've been moaning for years and years. Where are the Mandelas and the Martin Luther Kings and the Churchills and the FDRs, not just of Iran, but of the region? And do you see anybody emerging in Iran to be an extraordinary, charismatic leader who could change the scene? Because it doesn't seem to be happening anywhere else. Is there anyone you can think of, or just nobody?
I think, famously, Iran has one of the biggest brain drains of the world. So many brilliant Iranians have left. There are a few figures that reformists, who the reformists love, who are imprisoned. Mousavi, Karoubi. Is there a Mandela-type figure? I would say no, but maybe there are Iranians here who would disagree with me.
So would you say then that if there is reform to be had in the future, it's something that's going to happen coming from within the regime?
Yes, I think so. And that's something that Iranians, pretty much everybody I spoke to, not everybody, but I'd say 6, 7 out of 10 Iranians I spoke to said that they believe the only way the system can change is from within.
So gradual, organic, not
they've been
very quick.
They've been scared off by the Arab Spring. They've been scared off by Afghanistan and Iraq and what's happening around them. They really have been scared. Yeah.
There's a hand in the back there. Oh, that hand. Let's go with that hand, then you can be next.
Then just very briefly take on from that. So rather than looking for a Mandela, you both are looking for a Gorbachev type figure from within the system.
Maybe that's Rouhani. Maybe that's Rouhani.
Do you personally think that?
I think he could be. Yes, I think he could be. I think it's still too early. Is it, 9 months? How long has it been? I think it's too early, but a lot of people have likened him to Gorbachev, funnily enough. Yeah.
Thanks. Tehran's obviously a very vibrant, big city with lots of diversities, which you've said. But it's odd because it's clearly been a city that's changed after, with the revolution. It's completely different, and very few cities in the world have encountered that sort of social change or that sort of overlay that's completely changed the nature of what a city is. Where do you see what have you encountered? What's the views? What's the sort of thought and feeling that you've encountered through Tehran? As is it in a slow decline? Is it like, well, that's it? Or do people sort of want there to be a vibrant big city, or do they believe that now? And it's sort of where is the future of Tehran as a sort of a metropolis, as a big engine of Iranian, Persian, history, culture, diversity, and the such like?
I think it is a big, vibrant, amazing, beautiful, ugly metropolis. And I think it's just growing and growing and expanding, and it's this mega city. The future, it's due an earthquake, a very, very big one. It's overdue an earthquake. So if it doesn't get flattened, because of course many buildings have flouted all earthquake rules. So I was talking to somebody the other day that was saying it's pretty earthquake-wise, it's pretty dangerous place to be because of this earthquake. But if an earthquake doesn't flatten it, I think it's extremely culturally rich. I think it can only get bigger and better, apart from the pollution. The pollution is a big, big problem there that the government will have to tackle. And town planning is, for any Tehrani that's here, is absolutely appalling. But pollution is a big problem.
To what extent is Tehran another country to the rest of Iran? I mean, London is in a way another country to the rest of Britain. I mean, is Tehran similar kind of thing?
Yes, it is. Well, actually, so I travelled around the country quite a bit this time, and I was quite surprised. Cities like Shiraz and Esfahan, I was quite surprised that, some areas of the city seemed as liberal, as thriving as Tehran, and you'd see the same types of people, and you'd see young girls with, the tight-belted mantos,
Kind of max that
exactly,
they wear,
overcoats,
yes.
and the kind of bright daphne head scarves. So I think whatever happens, a bit like London maybe, whatever happens in Tehran kind of does trickle outwards.
Now, I mean, I spend a lot of time in Arab countries in the course of my job, and one thing that really struck me in the time when I was last in Iran in 2009, that relations between the sexes, particularly among young people, and particularly, I suppose, about more educated people, seemed way more relaxed than I would see them in Cairo or in Amman, or really in any way except possibly Beirut. But again, it's a contradiction, isn't it? That there's an official conservatism and there's a very real conservatism, but existing alongside it is a much more relaxed side of the society. Isn't that something which is bound to cause some kind of friction, or do they find a way of getting on together?
Yeah, does it cause friction? Not, God. Yes and no, as with most things in Iran. So, you can in certain parts of the city you can hold hands with your boyfriend, and young people do. And when
I've seen that. I was quite surprised.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, having been in Iran as well in the 90s, when it wasn't very common and women were much more covered up, and then seeing these bright headscarves and, very little headscarves and, bad hijab, as you call it, that seems to be an offence that people can get charged with.
Well, what for me, what's been really interesting is to see how bad hijab has spread throughout the city. So when I first started reporting on Tehran, it was pretty much just the north of the city. And in the last few years, you see kind of bright girls dressed up in bright coloured clothes and tight clothes all over now. Even in working class, poor, religious areas, you'll see a few brave girls, just dressed as they want. The city is changing. You can feel it. You can see it happening.
So that's change that's not coming from within the regime then. That's something that's happening organically from society.
Yeah, I guess it's like every city in Iran, it's just slightly different. But there's this new generation coming up. I think access to the internet, access to satellite TV, lots and lots of Iranians.
They crack down like mad on both. I mean, but people still manage to get to that, do they?
Yeah,
the
they
VPN
do, and
works.
they do and they don't. So as with crackdowns on bad hijab, these things tend to be kind of cyclical. So they'll kind of seasonal. So there'll always be a pre-summer crackdown. You'll read about it in the newspapers, and maybe some people will infer it to, this latest hardline crazy writ. No, it happens every year just before summer, when it gets hot and girls want to, wear cooler clothes and wear their ankle skimming jeans, there'll be a crackdown. And it's the same with satellite TV. So, I mean, so many people have got satellite dishes, and they'll pull back on the reins, and then they'll loosen the reins again. That's the nature of...
And the pulling back presumably does involve people getting arrested and sometimes being sent to prison.
Yes, I haven't heard of anybody being sent to prison for satellite. In Iran...
What is the... Because again, if people in the West who don't really look at Iran, think about the judicial system there, they think of some draconian punishment and some terrible experience awaiting people in prison. You're saying that actually it's not really quite like that.
Well, there are terrible punishments, but you can get a lot out of a lot of punishments in Iran. Last time I was there, I met a young couple. They'd been caught with some wine. She was from Shiraz, actually, and her family made Shirazi wine. And they had been given lashes, and they'd bought their lashes. So there's this, you can buy your lashes.
What do you mean buy your lashes?
Illegally. You pay so you don't get lashed.
Okay. So you pay money instead of getting lashed.
Yes, and I love this, outside courtrooms, there are, well, I don't love it because it's actually very sad. There are people in desperate need of money who will take your lashes for you.
You write about that in the book, don't you?
Yeah.
And half the money goes to the guy doing the
They're in
lashes.
cahoots with them, yeah. I like to think that, once they're in the room, they just exchange money and they don't get lashed because they're in cahoots with the guy that does the lashing.
You also tell a story about how the degree of the lashing can officially vary, and that one lasher was told to keep the Quran wedged under his armpit to stop him raising his hand the whole way, but he found a way around that.
It's so funny because when you read the law, and I spoke to countless lawyers, and God, I mean, so there is the law and there are all these guidelines, but then when you talk to people, kind of punishments are all over the place. There's no rhyme nor reason for punishments, and it's quite hard to get your head around the fact that nobody really seems to stick to the law. I guess it's Iran, but yeah, that is one of my favourite stories. This person who got lashed, so the guy doing the lashing, the flogger, had been told that he must keep the Quran wedged under his arm, so he couldn't lift his arm up very high, so the lashes wouldn't be so severe. So he'd made this contraption, and it's a sling, and he'd put the Quran in the sling, so the sling was still wedged in place where it should be, but then he also had the freedom to lift his arm very high.
Let's have another question or two. Loads of questions. Start here and we'll move back.
Hi. When I was a student in Tehran a few years ago, whenever we went to parties, you didn't really worry about the police coming, because as you say, you can generally speaking pay them off. But we did get very worried about the Basij coming, because they actually take people away. And this was back in 2007, and it was sort of, as you say, the southern Tehran, slightly poorer areas that were sort of used to recruit the Basij. How is that now? Has that changed a lot? And do you think perhaps in the last year that recruitment might, dry up a little bit? Perhaps?
That's an interesting question. I don't think the recruitment of the Basij has changed. What has changed in the last few years is that the Basij now are no longer responsible for raiding parties. So they do sometimes accompany police, but it's slightly changed. In a way, when I was talking to friends, they felt slightly more relaxed, but raids still happen. But actually, less frequently. Yeah, raids happen less frequently. But as for Basij's membership, no, as far as I know, no, that hasn't changed. A lot of the Basij, I met a lot of young guys, Basij members, who joined for the perks. There are lots of perks. It helps if you're a member. You get access to free football pitches, you get taken on day trips, and it's a big deal for somebody from a low-income family to suddenly have these opportunities. So even if you don't believe in it. It's it's a good opportunity.
Talking of parties, just how widely available is booze?
Oh, it's everywhere. It's not a corner of the city that you can't find booze.
And how much do people avail themselves of it? And what I'm saying is you can get it, but do many people like drinking it?
Oh my God, they love it. Yes, so I was talking to a booze man when I was there last. I wasn't buying, of course. And he was telling me that wine has really taken off. Francois Dulac. We got Iranians in the house here. They'll recognise Francois Dulac. So there's this one bottle of wine that I think is like one of the only bottles of wine that you can get in Iran. Of course, there are lots of Iranians that make their own wine. Armenians are allowed, have a license to make their own alcohol. So a lot of them sell it on the sly. Most of the booze comes from Iraq. Some of it comes from Turkey. I mean, you can get absolutely everything there.
Always good to know. So another question. Gentleman there, you've had your hand up for a while. Yeah.
Hello. You were talking about the sanctions and the way they were biting. And I wondered, do people blame the West or their rulers for that?
Depends who you talk to. Depends whereabouts in the city you are, who you talk to. I think the sanctions and the nuclear issue have had quite a unifying effect on Iranians. This is one thing that I've noticed. So Iranians are kind of universally unified and pissed off about sanctions, and unified as well in the belief that they should have nuclear capabilities, even if they're anti-regime. So that's an important consequence of sanctions. It has unified Iranians who normally would not see eye to eye and would not stand shoulder to shoulder at all.
Right, next one. Who's now? You've had your hand up for a while there. And we'll move to this side of the room.
Hi, Ramita. I can't wait to read your book. It sounds amazing. And I wondered, and I wondered if anyone in Tehran had read it and if they'd had any reaction from the regime at all. Or maybe it's too early days for that.
I think it's great to see you here, Dimitri. I think it's great. I think it's early days. Iranians that I know who've read it in Iran have loved it so far. The authorities, I'm not sure. I mean, I like to hope that, I like to think that it won't anger them. There's sex and drugs in the book, as there is in every city in the world, but hopefully they'll realise that the book is not about that. And actually, it's that I love the city, and it's all the fantastic things about the city, and it's the kindness of Iranians, and really it's the humanity of Iranians essentially. And the fact that, they are these amazing, adaptable, pragmatic people who love to be true to themselves, which is quite a romantic notion for me.
So a question from this side of the room. First hand that went up was there.
Hi, thanks for the talk. So you obviously cover a lot of really sensitive topics in your book, but were there any red lines that you didn't want to cross or things you decided not to mention just to ensure that you could, keep going back? Was there something that you backed away from?
So all journalists who work there are very aware of the red lines, the boundaries that are there in place, that you know what you can and can't.
What are the no-go areas then?
Religion, saying anything against the supreme leader, he banging on about human rights. So politics, religion, the obvious ones. And you have to be careful of that. And you will be imprisoned or you'll be kicked out if you're not careful of that. But that's part of everyday life for any journalist working there. My stories, of course everything in Iran is political, but my stories are not political. I was not trying to prove a point. I was simply telling other people's stories. So no, I didn't self-censor. There was nothing that I couldn't write about, because it wasn't really about how people feel about politics and human rights and all the kind of trickier subjects that journalists try to avoid. No, it was just really human stories, so no.
Yeah, it's people navigating their way through life.
Yeah.
In that particular, though, quite specifically Islamic system.
Yeah, exactly.
So isn't there bound to be a way that there might be people there who say, look, she is trying to undermine it. She's bringing the whole thing into disrepute.
Yeah, I mean, you can interpret kind of anything in any way you want. That's true. However, I think that, the essence of my book is about these amazing people and is about the relationships they have and how they navigate life, and is really about humanity itself. It's not about politics. It's not about nuclear negotiations and religion. Of course, it's Iran, so that's all there, and it's all weaved in it.
Let's go towards the back there.
Hi, Ramita. I was just wondering, do you think that this sort of wearing of masks and taking a very pragmatic contingency approach and sort of dissimulation is something that's particularly new to Iran after the Islamic Revolution in the last 30 years, or is it something that Iranians have been doing for hundreds of years, and that's how this country has sort of kept its identity and culture through multiple invasions, modernization, Islamic Revolution, numbers of different wars, lots of different more powerful entities around it trying to nibble bits and influence things, and it's this sort of pretending to go along with things. I don't necessarily say lying, but wearing different masks or taking this I mean, even in Shia Islam, taqiyya is accepted, this sort of idea of pretending to be something if in the long run you'll get to your goal. For sure.
And that's why I mention it in the book. Yes, I would say Iranians love to debate this endlessly, and I had lots of debates with people about this, and I mentioned taqiyya in the book. So is it, isn't it? Some Iranians felt very passionately that Iranians have always been this way, that it's part of the culture. Others felt not. I think what has happened is that since the revolution, whatever was or wasn't there, has only been made more extreme. So yeah, I think the revolution did change things, but yeah, it's a debate. It depends what side you stand on.
You had a question here? Wait for the microphone, though.
I was just wondering, did you come across a sort of anti-Western sentiment at all amongst the youth there? As obviously that was quite prevalent with the previous regime, with Ahmadinejad. Or did you feel that was something that was just more the authorities, something that they were trying to really hammer home?
God, out and about in Tehran, there isn't much anti-Western sentiment. You can go to protests where there are conservative kind of fundamentalists burning the flag, but even when they burn the flag, it's kind of, most of the time it's pretty half-hearted. Kind of, here we go again, stamp on the American flag. So, and I think politically, yes, you can meet young Iranians who are, pretty inflamed and angry at the West and imperialist powers. But just as you can here, really, you can meet people in the West who are kind of angry at kind of imperialist America. But one thing I have noticed is that Iranians, I never really come across an Iranian who's genuinely kind of has a personal vendetta against Westerners. No, and I took my husband, Gabriel, there last year, and we travelled around the country, and sometimes he got an earful about, you sly foxes, the British, and oh, you screwed us over, but he was welcomed with open arms. I mean, you must have you experienced?
I've only ever experienced friendliness,
Yeah.
actually. Explain how it must feel from the Iranian point of view that the British have these colossal compounds. I mean, not many people perhaps know this. I don't know, haven't been to Tehran, but the British Embassy isn't just a building. It has its own very large park and a large wall around it with the lion and the unicorn and these great big gates. And there's another residential compound as well, which is also huge. I mean, it's as if, for those who don't know Tehran, it's as if, an area between about Tottenham Court Road and Regent Street is the Iranian compound. I mean, maybe not quite as central as that, but I mean, what do people make of that?
Well, that gets my goat. Yeah, it's the most fabulous piece of land they've got. But it was actually Iranians themselves. So that the Qajars, I can never say it, who were this ruling dynasty of kind of gambling women lovers, really, who gambled away big swathes of Tehran. And I believe Golhak, one of the compounds you were talking about, was given over to the Brits. Yeah.
And they've hung on to it.
Yes, I would have.
Yeah. No, it is a quite extraordinary sight, actually. And you sit in the British Embassy there in the building where they have this plasterwork with VR and the dinner plan for the Tehran conference there with Churchill and Stalin and Roosevelt during the Second World War, and the one, as a British person there, the one thing that I have found as a British journalist as well, working with the BBC, is that sometimes quite senior people have imputed towards us power that we absolutely do not have. The idea, you get this feeling that maybe this is what it's like to be British turning up in a place about 80 years ago, that people think you do run things. I mean, it does surprise me that people in Iran, some of them anyway, appear to have, maybe they're just being polite, but seem to have an exaggerated sense of Britain's influence, not least over their own country.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's true. I'm never sure if it's that kind of deference is just Iranians being polite or if it's kind of paranoia. There are lots of conspiracy theories, aren't there? The Iranians are the kings of conspiracy theories, and they do believe that Britain is behind a lot.
Well, and we were at different times in the history of... right, next questions. So, wait for the mic.
Hi there. Very interesting. Thank you very much. You kind of equated lying with breathing, saying it's necessary for survival in Tehran. Could you explain that a bit more? Is that in terms of lying to the authorities to get by, or lying to themselves to sort of convince themselves that much of this stuff is normal? And is that thinking the same in rural areas?
No, I wouldn't say lying to themselves. Not necessarily to the authorities either. So it's just everyday lying. So I guess for the authorities it would be you don't drink when you do, because that could get you in a lot of trouble. It would also be, as a young girl, you're expected to be a virgin. And, lots of young people have premarital sex. So it would be lying so you're not socially judged, or so, you can find a husband. So it's, just everyday lying to either make sure that you're not punished by the authorities or that you're not judged by society. That answer it.
Back of the room.
Thanks. Taghi Amirani, I'm a documentary filmmaker and interested in the world in which your book was written. I'm curious about the title of the book, City of Lies. It's a pretty damning blanket statement about a city of about 10 to 12 million. I'm curious to know, is that solely your idea for the title, or was there some pressure from the publisher? Where did it come from?
By the way, I remember meeting you in Tehran years and years ago. No, absolutely no pressure. And the title has had really interesting response. Most Tehranis have loved it because, of course, they can relate to it. It's the first thing, and I discussed it with all the characters, with my interviewees, and then we'd have, get back to Darius's point, we'd have these big discussions about lying in society in Iran. It's not meant to be, it's not said in a pejorative way at all. City of Lies, it's because of the everyday need to lie, to be true to yourself. To me, it's testament to the great Iranians' spirit and romantic notion that you must be true to yourself. And the fact that Iranians are these really adaptable people, that they want to lead the lives they want to lead. And in order to do that, they will lie to get there in the end. So no, to me it's not damning at all. And it's a city I love. I'm Tehrani, I'm Iranian. So no, I mean, it would be absurd.
No, it's just I mean, like you, I've been going to Iran for the last 20 years. We make films in Iran, have hung around with Iranian news journalists and made films about journalists trying to tackle the challenges. And when in a country where so, I mean, I'm not an apologist for the Ayatollahs, let's just get one thing clear, just a filmmaker. But in a country where so little comes out, where when the odd film comes out or the odd book comes out, it becomes the representative image of that nation. It becomes a representative image of a whole people. So titles like Lipstick Jihad, Reading Lolita in Tehran, or other films and other books, and City of Lies. That's a city of 12 million people. It gives a sense to the reader. I'm not interested in what the Persians think about it. The outside world comes away with this image of an Iranian nation of liars.
Well, it would be foolish to
It would be foolish, but that's what happens.
Foolish. Let me finish. It would be foolish to judge a book without reading it.
It would be absolutely foolish to judge it. Yeah.
And also, the names of books are symbolic as well. So it is symbolic of what happens in the city of 12 million people. And in that city, as you know yourself, you are forced to live pretty much two lives. You have your internal home life, you have your external public life. You know, it's symbolic of many things. So, you know, to anybody who would presume to judge it simply by a title, there's so much more to it. And, you know, and I think, I have yet really to meet a Tehrani who would argue that point, that you don't lie in Tehran. Of course you lie in every city, but the point with Iran is everything is more exaggerated because of the society, because of the way it is, because of 30 years of the Islamic regime.
Sure, I mean, I respect your wish to display the challenges that the Iranians face.
Let's move on to the next thing. I think you've had a good say there, but time's limited. Front row here, there's a question. We've all been from the back so far. The back benches, front bencher.
You mentioned that you were brought up in England and went to Iran as an adult, as a journalist. So in some ways, you are kind of like also English, you're non-Iranian. How did you gain the trust of Iranians? Because we all know, all Iranians, we know, it's a very, it's a society very much class-oriented and there's a lot of barriers.
Yeah.
How did you manage to kind of move into, for example, a working class neighborhood? Did you have to bribe people with money? Did you have to take someone from the same social background as a kind of hold your hand? I mean, how did it work? How the doors open for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I was, with all my characters, it was always introduced through people. So there was that connection there, whether it was a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, or, you know, a contact of a journalist. So I worked with quite a few local journalists. They were invaluable. They were so helpful to me. They were amazing. So once that connection is there, immediately there is some kind of trust there when you have that link and you have that connection. As for being an outsider, yet a Tehrani, you're absolutely right. So that really helped talking to the women, actually talking to most of them, because on one hand, I understood them culturally. You know, I got the language, I got the culture, I got their meaning. On the other hand, you know, especially being a woman, they felt that I wouldn't judge them in the same way. You know, of course, for example, you know, very religious young Iranian women and men have this, you know, think that if you're Western, you must be promiscuous. You know, so they then are far more, you know, open. I think they then are much more relaxed about talking about their sex lives because they think, well, you must be doing it too, so you won't judge me. So that actually really helped.
Like it. Who's next? Back row there, sir.
I would like to advocate for a fatwa that orders you to read it a little bit from your book.
Yeah. Well, there you are.
Thank you. I don't know what it was a voice from there, but it was nice.
There's one here. I think you've got a fan. There's a gentleman here.
I just wanted to follow up from that question on trust. The question was about trust with you. Bearing in mind the lies theme, is there a lot of trust with people for each other? Are the lies kind of individual or kind of a collective thing? And just putting the trust with the lies.
This is one of the things that I love about the city, in that, you know, everything is exaggerated, so lying is exaggerated, but then, you know, the good stuff's exaggerated. So friendships mean that much more. You know, bonds are really strong. And when you do share the truth, it's that much more meaningful. And the truth there is very precious. You know, secrets there are very precious because you know what can happen if it's in the wrong hands. Does that answer your question?
More hands? Want to hit the front seat, front row?
Actually, just moving away from your book, because you mentioned sanctions. What's the future for Tehran? It seems to have cooled down between America and Iran, but Israel is still kind of pushing a bad agenda towards it. So what do you think is going to happen in the future?
Do you know, I really believe Iran is one of those countries that you just cannot predict. As my Iranian famous analyst is a testament to. Yeah, so it's just impossible. The future, I don't know. I have no idea. Will Rouhani deliver? It looks like he's got a chance. You know, he seems to be putting up a fight. I hope so.
Now, I was, about a month ago, I interviewed the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, in his office in the Ministry of Defense in Tel Aviv. And he has been banging on about Iran and about their murderous plans for the Jews for many, many years. And he still sees Iran very much as a clear and present danger, and he has loads of backing in the United States for that particular point of view. And he may well say, this is all very charming, but in fact you're whitewashing this country, that there are people out in the country who are quite prepared to do awful things to others who don't agree with them, and especially to the Jews. I mean, is that a completely misplaced point of view that he's got, or is there something in it?
Oh, Bibi. Yes, I think it is. I mean, according to him, Iranians don't wear jeans. Do you remember?
Yes.
Didn't he?
Yeah.
Was it a tweet? What did he say? I mean,
You
know, how wrong can you be?
Yeah. Like you can't wear jeans in Iran or something.
Yeah, he's so way off. Yeah, let's not dignify him with a response.
I thought I should.
Jewish population though, Iran, doesn't it? That's quite a big Jewish population.
Yeah, shrinking, but they're still there, hanging on. Yeah. And there's this one fabulous road in downtown Tehran, Manucheri, where they've got beautiful antique shops, and there are still a few old Iranian Jews there. They're wonderful to talk to, yeah.
Why is it shrinking though? Is it just they're leaving the country, or just naturally people just aren't having kids?
Tel Aviv, Tehran. Tel Aviv. Well, no, actually, you know, I spoke to quite a few when I was there last time, and it's pretty powerful. When these Iranian Jews who have this amazing identity of being Tehranis, you know, they love the country. They see themselves as they are Iranian. They've been there for generations, as long as we have, and they're very interesting identities. They feel very Tehrani. The ones I spoke to.
I've always found that people there also being quite pragmatic and adaptable. The woman I worked with at the BBC in Tehran at the time of the demonstrations in 2009, we'd been banned from reporting from the streets, and I'd had a call from someone in the ministry saying, when I say you're banned from reporting from the streets, you really are, and it won't necessarily mean just being deported. You know, you could get into some serious trouble here. Be careful what you do. So I thought, well, I won't report from the streets, but we'll walk round to see what's going on. So I went out with this colleague, Iranian colleague in the office, and she was a very smart, well-turned-out woman with fantastic manicure also on her toes. And before we went out, she took off her nice strappy sandals and put on a pair of trainers. And I said to her, why are you putting on trainers? Because are we going to have to be doing some running, do you think? And she said, no, it's just that if we get arrested and they see my nails, I'll really be in trouble with the Basij. And in fact, that was the thing. She was waiting. We didn't get arrested. It was fine. And we walked around and watched these things. You know, I was quite open-mouthed at seeing some of the scenes. The guys from the Basij with these enormous clubs, and I could see the ferocity of the crackdown there at that particular time. I mean, my feeling was that 2009, they didn't get the critical mass that people had a few years later in Arab countries. But, you know, as we know now, change is coming in a very difficult and painful way. Now, you've done some really amazing reporting out of Syria. What is the Iranian, as far as you can tell, the approach to the, what do people in Tehran, the kind of people you were talking to, what do they think about the very big involvement that Iran has in the civil war in Syria?
Oh, it's interesting watching news reports in Iran on Syria, because the actual opposite, polar opposite of what you see here. So here, you see journalists embedded with rebels. There, of course, journalists embedded with government forces. So Iranians are scared what will happen if Assad is toppled. But do you know what? I did try to talk to...
Scared of a Sunni extremist regime? Or
yes, they are. I did talk to Iranians about Syria, but this is one thing that I found. This is something else that's changing, and I think this has to do with sanctions and just the state the economy is in at the moment. They are not as engaged with what's happening in, Palestine and Israel and Syria anymore, because they've got enough to worry about now. It's their internal politics, and yes, Iran is, involved with Hezbollah, is involved with Syria, but when you chat to them about it, it always comes back to just inflation, getting bread on their table, sanctions, just what is happening to them right now. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Iranians in a way there hasn't been for many years.
Do you think that if these nuclear talks don't work out, and one of the carrots is supposed to be that sanctions will be lifted gradually, do you think if those talks don't work out and sanctions aren't lifted, that economic hardship might cause more, they might forget about their fears about the Arab example, and people might think, well, it's time to get back on the streets again because we cannot live like this?
Who knows? Do you know, I know I'm being really non-committal, but that's because whenever I have attempted to predict Iran, you just never get it right. Maybe, yes, some people do say that it's all down to economics, that, once fuel prices go up, subsidies are completely slashed, then Iranians will take to the streets. Who knows?
Well, Ramita, I think there's got time for one more question, if anyone has one. I'll give you one more chance. No? Yes, there's one there.
In this country, obviously, we're contemplating the possibility of letting Scotland go. How much awareness is there in Iran of the Kurdistan minority in the north?
Yeah, Kurds don't speak out in Iran. And there have been, there always are regular arrests of Kurdish dissidents and Kurdish journalists. But, the difference, so it's not just the Kurds, it's the Baluchis, it's the, the Khuzistanis, it's the Azeris. I think Iran is slightly different, that maybe Iranians here would disagree with me. But I think that Iranians have got quite a united sense of Iranian identity. Of course, there are Kurds who want to break away. I've also met Kurds. I mean, I have Kurdish Tehrani friends who do not want that. So maybe it's this, same as Scotland, that it's not this big, overwhelming movement to break away. It's not. I don't feel the divisions there, but then I haven't reported on them and I haven't gone looking for them.
Well, before we give Ramita an absolutely enormous round of applause, I'd just like to say yet again that there's a large pile of books there awaiting new owners, and there's a pen which Ramita will be using to sign those books. So kindly form an orderly queue, and a big round of applause.
Thank you.